We did about 50 million in fundraising. The founder's personality comes through the company, right? That's why you hear horror stories sometimes, right?
One of the banks saying you can't get promoted if you don't come in 5 days a week. It's optional, but you won't get promoted.
Yeah, so it's not really optional. Yeah, I don't know what I... So I will say I spoke to 100 VCs in my pre-seed raise, and I couldn't raise in Europe. I couldn't get a lead here. So I went to the States.
Do you notice like a big difference having worked in the US and Europe in terms of like culture at startups? Because you hear a lot about the like 996.
996 is an indicator someone's working hard, but it's not necessarily an indicator that they're producing good quality. You got to look at what someone's generating ultimately. And I think maybe not get too caught up in the proxy. People can work too much on the wrong thing, for sure.
Quick admin note from legal. None of this is investment advice. Please speak to a professional if you're looking for specific advice. This is all commentary on investing in AI. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mergers podcast. We're back in the Loom Club with my friend Ken Thomas. He can figure out how to give you double-digit IRRs, but he can't figure out how to iron his own t-shirt.
Gotta pick your battles. Gotta pick your battles for sure.
Just busy doing deals, eh?
Wheeling dealing.
Wheeling and dealing. And with us today, our guest, Hanna Lewis of Blue Wire Capital, early investors in Monzo and Deliveroo, and quite an interesting journey because you've been an operator, a founder, and now investor.
Yep, that's me. Sorry.
Well, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's sort of up to you where you want to start the journey, I guess, at the beginning with events.com.
I would say that I maybe have had an unconventional career journey into investing, particularly from a European perspective. I think we'll get into that. Yeah. But I am at the early stage. And funnily enough, I did do economics at university at UCL, where literally 80% of my cohort went into finance after. So it's kind of funny that most of them are now leaving banking and like going into startups. And I'm kind of I'm zagging the opposite way. So I kind of found tech startups by accident, and it was sort of born. I know I should say that I always wanted to be in tech and all this kind of stuff, and you're meant to really tell this journey. And I used to kind of say that when I was pitching to investors.
You've had some PR training, basically.
Yeah, basically. But to be honest, I was at university, I was doing economics, everyone on my cohort wanted to be an investment banker, and I knew that I didn't. My parents had kind of had a rough time with their own business in the recession, and I'd gone very deep on that part of the economy and had decided that I didn't massively want to participate in privatizing gain and nationalizing loss. And I was kind of hoping I could do something a little bit more fulfilling and like maybe have a career that paid me really well, but also did something that I found inspiring or productive. And so by chance, when I was studying abroad, I had to work. I was working in a university kitchen, actually making sandwiches, actually a great job because you could just stick podcasts on and make burritos. But I was studying in a cafe in a nice part of San Diego, and I overheard 2 angel investors kind of talking about their angel investments. And the way they were kind of talking at each other, they were sort of boasting about them a bit, being like, oh, my startup's doing really well. And I was like, okay, I can do something here. I've got a British accent. I can like kind of beeline. So I was like, oh, hi, introduced myself. They're like, oh, what are you doing over here? It's really unusual for British people to be in San Diego.
Especially making burritos.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, I'm over here studying. I'm actually applying for internships at the moment. Kind of sounds like maybe you guys know some startups. And they're like, oh my God, of course. And introduced me to like 10 startups. And one of those was events.com.
Oh, wow.
And I interned at events.com. My degree in the States was quite easy comparatively to my UK one because it just wasn't as high stakes. It was kind of my year abroad. So I ended up working for them full time and becoming the founder's sort of EA, essentially, and like kind of just doing my uni on the side. And then at the end of that year, he was like, look, like we're growing really fast, go finish your degree in England and then come back and be my chief of staff. And I was like, I've never heard of that. What's that?
There's even a few communities like for chief of staffs specifically. I know there's one in New York, and then there's also one of our LPs runs one as well. So yeah, it's becoming like a place people should aim for now.
Yeah, I think it's a very good bridge if you're in finance or consultancy and you want to kind of come into startups in a very generalist way where you get to be a bit strategic and do a bit of execution, it's a really good stopgap to like figuring out then what department you want to go into after, and you get to work really closely with founders. You're kind of their right hand. It obviously kind of depends which kind of chief of staff you are, but generally speaking, you're in the room with all the C-suite. You help on the fundraise. You can then specialize in sales or product and like kind of pick out your specialties. There's also a really great training role, I think, to be a founder as well, because you see so much of it. And you also see like the emotional journey of founders, which I think is something that you shouldn't underestimate as well. That was quite a long story. Sorry, I haven't even really given you my full background. But,
no, that's very interesting.
But that's kind of how I ended up in tech and like not in that route. I sort of went down that role, was very lucky to be offered a chief of staff position before they were even a thing, and then kind of stuck with that and then became a founder out of those experiences.
It's just quite nice to speak to someone as well that didn't want to just do the IB grind. I think that's...
Yeah, I kind of sound like really, I don't mean to sound really morally superior. I'm really not. I just didn't want it like they did. And when you're in a cohort where everybody's super bright and super driven, and you see it, you just think, oh, this is like not something I can care about. And I'm the kind of person that needs to want it. If I want something, I think I've got enough ambition and whatever to go and get it. But if it wasn't for me. And there wasn't that many other options available. Weirdly, I think if you're in one of those environments, it's basically, do you want to be a consultant? Do you want to be a banker? Or do you want to go do a master's? They were really the three options available. I was the only person I know from a cohort of like 300 people that went into tech.
Yeah.
So it's changed a lot.
I think that's fair though. I think it's obviously something that gets almost pushed on people. It's a great learning environment, great salary, obviously.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to get there. And like
it's also a huge door opener, right? Like I think most people when they're 20 don't have a clue what they want to do.
Yeah.
I didn't and I think most of my cohort didn't either. They just knew that these are great routes and like you can leave at any point and like basically all doors are open for you after as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's especially consultancy. It's that great one where you get to pick up all these skills and you get another stamp on your CV. And it's also great if you then want to go into startups, right? Like so many startups, if you look at the JD for like the really, really good ones are like, hey, if you've got IB experience or consulting, we want to have you because it's just like a good screener for like is prepared to work stupid hours, is obviously really smart.
So you took the chief of staff role.
Yeah.
And then you were with them while they scaled up.
We didn't do clear cut rounds, but we basically did sort of a reset Series A up to sort of a Series C. So in that time between me kind of being sort of joining them the first time as like an EA, all the way through to when I lost my visa because of COVID. Fun. And also just general, it's really hard to get to H1Bs. We did about 50 million in fundraising.
Okay. Yeah, wow.
In that time over those years. So it was a pretty strong hyperscale journey and the revenues went up as well. I don't think I can say how much because it's still a private company, but...
What's one of the big takeaways that you wouldn't necessarily see unless you were at a scale up? Something growing really quickly.
Even like really successful growth journeys have these like firefighting moments. So even when things look like they're all going right, there's still like lots of stuff falling apart. And I think also like the caliber of the team, I think defines the success of that scale. Okay. Because when everything's growing really fast, I think this is when you see really talent-dense teams do really, really well because you can't have your eyes on everything. You've kind of got to trust that everybody's really, really smart and executes and has low egos so no one's pulling each other apart. Yeah. Because otherwise, if you can't devolve and decentralize and just hope that all the cogs are working, I think I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I think that's when everything falls apart. And I think that's when you see like people hit venture scale. It's because they've built good cultures and good teams. And it's those founders that are super obsessive about talent and who they hire. I've seen that as well. I worked at a company called Omnia for a bit before I was an investor, and I saw the same dynamics of just the most insanely talented team. And I think even Pigment, the founder of Pigment, she was at Index Ventures and she was on, I think, Harry Stebbings' podcast, but she is clearly obsessive about talent. And I think you can see that in the success of Pigment as well. So
Harry Stebbings is a small competitor podcast you may have heard of.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that about talent-dense teams and trusting your team. I mean, the last company I worked for, saw them from C, was with them from C to Series B in a very short period of time. And I feel like that at the top, some ego stuff there, and like that does kind of affect culture top down, and like, you know, you have this weird inner fighting, like, no one really trusts each other. Yeah. And yeah, it's funny because you don't really look at that a lot of times, but that could be a creeper thing that kills a lot of companies simply because people don't trust each other. Then you have this infighting, undercutting people, nothing gets done, you know. So
I suppose micromanagement as well. Like you've got to trust people to.
Yeah, founder-led companies can be, and I'm not really speaking about the ones I've worked for, but I think you can. I'm actually not. But the founder's personality comes through the company, right? And what they believe about culture or whatever. And that's why you hear horror stories sometimes, right? Yeah. Because ultimately they have a completely inordinate amount of say in these things. And so you're relying on, and I think that's why it's really important if you want to go work for a startup, that you really understand like the caliber and I don't want to say like the pedigree of the founder, but like what do they care about? Do they care about culture? Where have they come from? Have they seen how to grow a company before? Is this their first time doing it? If it's their first time doing it, do you feel like you've actually got to know this person? Because, you know.
If you want a crash course on that, there's American Apparel have a documentary on Netflix now, and that is crash course on exactly.
I haven't watched it yet, but I really want to.
I watched it yesterday. It's an hour long, and it's like, this dude was a maniac, and then everyone else became like cult followers. It was nuts. But yeah, culture.
Totally nuts.
Thing is, I guess I would say that that's quite hard to glean in a few interviews. So is there like anything, you know, if someone was leaving IB, right? To go to a startup or a different job, what sort of things can you look out for? Like, what are the red flags?
Hey there, looking to level up your lifestyle between big meetings and bold moves? Loom Club's your place for that. Located in Islington and Hackney, it's a great social club with a lot of events, big wellness scene. They've hosted everyone from TikTok to Deloitte. The reviews are great. Highly recommend you coming through. And they're also one of the sponsors of this today's episode. Try Loom for yourself for a 2-week experience for the price of a cinema ticket. Quote the mergers on the website for insider welcome. You can check them out at loom.club, or you can catch them at loom.club on Instagram.
I mean, like really high churn in the, like, you can check that on LinkedIn, right? Like how many people have left. But yeah, I mean, you want to, I would say also infighting can happen if the company's not growing, because like everybody's fighting over like the same slices of pie. Yep. So you want to be going somewhere where ideally, you know, the founders have just raised, you know how much their revenue is growing by, you believe in the market. And then when you talk to the team, there are really obvious things, right? Like if companies don't bother to have values and people don't know what they are, or if they never run offsites, or if even when you talk to people and you ask to talk to people, like, because a lot of companies will do sort of almost like not personality fit interviews, but almost like meet a random member of the team, like meet someone from product and you're in sales. And if you're not hearing good things about the company from that, and they're not offering like positive opinions, I mean, it's almost like what people don't say as well can define it.
Yeah, I think too, if you're going through a process with a startup and like, you know, you see a lot more now if you're having like a lot of interviews, especially for like a younger company, for any company really, like if you're having a lot of interviews and it's not like C-suite or director level, and like, hey, like maybe there's something going on in the background, like, and sometimes like people have hard times making decisions, things like that nature. Like, yeah,
I think it can depend. I would say I went through like 6 or 7 interviews for like a couple of my jobs that were really good, but they did know what they wanted.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's a big problem with startups and startup hiring, is a lot of the time they don't know what they want. And then that's why that person doesn't work out. Because they're growing and they don't really know what they need, they'll often hire either the wrong person for that job, because they think they want something that they don't, or they just actually don't need that role. So that can definitely be a risk. I'm not sure there's a way to de-risk that other than to just go back to first principles with those people of like why they're hiring for this role, what it's going to do, like how they got to that conclusion, those kinds of things, I think.
Yeah, like a very clear job description, like what are the KPIs, like what is success? KPIs you're not happy with?
No, I just think it depends on the job, right? I think like with sales, you can like very clearly set out like what success looks like. With a chief of staff role, it's basically impossible. Okay. And then, you know, with product and things, you can it depends how early they are, because like their product might change, right? So you might think you're building a B2B app and then it ends up being B2B2C, and then all the metrics will change. And so it's having the flexibility, I guess, to do that. unfortunately, there are no like hard and fast rules, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, picking a startup is notoriously tough, right? Like,
Definitely.
as an investor or employee.
You tell us, Rory. You pick it.
No, just, like I'm saying, like it's risky, right? It's risky in VC. Like the fail rate of investments in VC is higher than.
Well,
there's just less data.
Here's how you look at it, right? So like, as someone joining an early stage startup, you're kind of an investor yourself. Like we spread our bets across X amount of companies in a fund because we have the capital to do it. You're human capital at that point. So you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. That is a startup you're choosing to work for. Yeah. So like, it is very much, I guess, risky for that respect. So you probably should be diligencing this stuff a bit more than, like she said, speak to people who might not actually be there anymore, but they're going to give you, put you in touch with people as well. But just being very mindful of the process that you're going down. You know, I mean, like you're investing yourself to this company. That's why they give you equity, a high portion of it. You know.
Yeah.
So.
And it depends on what stage, right? So like by Series A, they'll have product market fit. They should have certain amount of growth. And like, you can almost treat it like an investor, right? So like the closer you are to like second time founders building in a huge, fast growing market that have really strong pull that are solving a hair on fire problem and you get equity, great, right? But that doesn't mean all great companies look like that, firstly.
Yeah.
And secondly, the earlier you go, like the more you know that like if you invest a pre-seed, if you join a pre-seed company, the chances are they're going to pivot slightly. Like Ori is in the same rough space, but it definitely really moved its product until it found product market fit. And that means you're just taking a bet, basically like at the earlier stages, taking a bet on like the founder and the problem space being directionally correct. And if solved, massive opportunity, right? So
that makes sense. And that ties into what you say about pre-seed and seed investing, which is it's all on the founder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll know like 15 minutes into the call, directionally which way it's going to go. Like it's kind of a vibe thing, but like you'll know by looking at some of the other second time founder, like how serious they are about something, but how they present themselves is very important, you know?
Is that actually honest? Do you notice like a big difference having worked in the US and Europe in terms of like culture at startups? Because you hear a lot about the incubators and like Silicon Valley and the like 996.
This is kind of a new thing of this whole new terminology, right? I would say, to be fair, I did work every Saturday. I was at events.com, but I didn't really think about it as being 996. I just had a lot of work to do. But I also worked quite a lot in the UK as well. Like I do think that the very high ambition startups in Europe also just always worked that, but maybe we've coined it now, and now it's okay to ask people to do it. I saw a post, was it on LinkedIn or was it in one of the founder groups I'm in? Like a founder had put like in their own Slack, like, hey, 10% just to say like 9 people in the company are doing 996. That's less than 10% of us. It's completely optional, but if you do it, you get a 25% increase in your pay and 100% increase in your equity on offer.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like I feel like you would never be able to be like, hey, work your weekends, but it'd be kind of like wink wink, you got a lot of work to do. And it's like if you get it done, and then the reward of it is you get promoted, right? And like you get this and you get that, and you get to say like, this is what I did. So
at what point is that not optional? Because then you're gonna be indexing on the people that are doing this quote unquote 996, right? And then your company just becomes a bunch of people that are doing 996 because everyone else they're not gonna progress.
It's a bit
like find a way out.
One of the banks that's saying you can't get promoted, or like your bonus will be like zeroed if you don't come in 5 days a week. Can't remember which one it was or the exact terms, but it was the same. Like it's optional, but you won't get promoted.
Yeah, so it's not really optional. Yeah, I don't know what I. Yeah, I don't know what I think about this yet, because I think people were doing it anyway. But I think that I was talking about this with a friend who works in tech. She's in operations, and we were talking about how like there's a very certain type of person that has no responsibilities, and they're probably a certain age, and they're probably a certain gender where this really favors, where it's like there's going to be a certain group of people, particularly parents, who just get left out of this. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to build as good companies. And actually, I think like the average unicorn founders are like 34 or 35. So I think we've got to be really careful to follow, like to stay quite first principled, which is like 996 is an indicator someone's working hard and working, but it's not necessarily an indicator that they're producing good quality. Yeah. So like, I think you always need to just like go back to the first principle of like, what's the output? Like you got to look at what someone's generating ultimately. And I think maybe not get too caught up in the proxy, which this is a proxy still. Yep. Like theoretically it should lead to more outcomes, but not necessarily. People can work too much on the wrong thing for sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
I agree. I think it's right now what's funny is that there's nothing wrong with it, but the way they're approaching the conversation is interesting because it's always like when people talk about it now, so it's like, oh, other people should be working 996. But if you ask those persons how much are they working, I would be very surprised if they were actually working as much as they were saying compared to what they should saying other people should be working. You know,
I invested in a few others from our group. The mergers, we invested in like a startup. I won't say who, but it's going really well. But he's very open on LinkedIn when he's hiring. And I don't know if he says 996, but he's like, this is the environment and like the expectation.
For sure. I think it's okay, right? Like investment banks have never hidden that you're going to be working long, and you should sift out for people because there's nothing worse than hiring someone that doesn't fit culturally. And the fact is like, you will be working long hours, but I still think it's about the autonomy of results. And I don't think we need to call it this 996 stuff, but the most successful startups I've seen hire like for the kind of person they want, which is usually this unashamedly all-in, ambitious person. And I think that early stage is increasingly doing that.
So in your startup, how is it working there? Was it 996 before 996 was a thing in the West, or?
It was 10-10-7.
10-10-7. No. Wow.
Wait, that's shorter hours. I'm an idiot. Like it's the same hours, but it's one more day. So it's 10-10-7.
We were like, wow.
It was 24/7, 7 until midnight every day. Yeah, I don't know. We didn't track each other's work, but we were all working silly hours because there's 3 of you, right?
Yeah.
And you don't see anyone and you work your weekends. And I think that's very normal.
Yeah. So which is a great segue. So like when was the point you decided to say, hey, we're going to, well, let's say how you wanted to do a startup or start a startup, how you came with your founders and how did that agreement go to making that jump?
Yeah. So I worked with Paul and Jack at Ori. Paul was the COO, I was the chief of staff, and Jack was one of the lead engineers. And we worked together, I think we all overlapped for about 1.5 years. And then Jack went to a different company, and then I realized I kind of wanted to found something, but I needed a bit of different experience. I wanted to get more product experience. So it's not on my CV anymore because everybody like smooths over their LinkedIn, let's be real. I jumped ship for like 6 months and worked somewhere where I got a lot more product experience. I basically like quite a product-y role. And also it meant that like, it wasn't so Larry with us all like leaving Ori to start a company. There was like a little bit more. But yeah, so basically we had no HR person at Ori, and I was having to do like all of our kind of people stuff. And of that, there's just like a lot of invisible operational crap that like is boring to describe. So I won't describe it on this podcast because I'll put everyone to sleep. But like, needless to say, there was like hours and hours of like data admin and getting people laptops and slacking like accountants about payroll and P45s. And I was just like, this is so dull. I must be able to automate this. Like theoretically an onboarding workflow or like a payroll workflow. Like it's like 4 softwares. It's the same every month or it's the same every time it happens. Like how am I as a human still doing this? Like it's so dull. No offense to like HR people that do this.
I was waiting for that.
But like even HR people would rather be doing the strategic stuff, and then they get weighed down with like all this like keeping the lights on stuff, and then they don't get to do the strategic part of their role, right? So most HR people also don't like doing this, I will say. They want to be doing the stuff that's like raising up like about culture and like how you hire great talent and like how you think about growing a business and performance and leadership. They're not like, oh, I can't wait to like download this P45 and re-upload it into a different system, which is like a lot of what happens. So I got increasingly obsessed with trying to automate my job, basically. Hello.
I was gonna say,
sorry, there's a dog walking past our ankles. We're not just
special guest.
We have a special guest. We have our head of HR.
The Loom
It's
Club
like
mascot.
this HR sounds pretty rough stuff.
So I got increasingly obsessed with trying to automate this part of my job. So I looked at a bunch of softwares, including softwares that cost like 50 grand a year. And weirdly, it couldn't automate this kind of workflow. Then I tried to build something myself in no-code tools. Then I talked to like 50 COOs. I reached out to all these people on different ops groups. So I just and this started like coming into my weekends. I started doing it in my evenings, like
996.
Like 996. I started doing it for fun on weekends. My boyfriend was like, "You're a freak," but I was like, really like, I have to solve this. And what I kind of basically realized is, I guess like fast forward the tape, we're in a world of AI agents now. An AI agent is like a really slick, fancy, and like anthropomorphized way of saying unstructured workflow automation, i.e. like an unstructured workflow, for those that don't know, is just when a decision affects the next step of the workflow. Like a normal structured workflow is like, if 1, 2, 3, then 4, then 5. Whereas an unstructured one's like, oh, you've got this email and it says, yes, I do want the job, therefore you need to send them this. Oh, I don't want this job. Well, can I ask about what the pay is again? Oh, okay, well, we need to send them this. It's like slightly contextualized. That decision node of like that information affects what step you need to take next. HR is very unstructured, but like the actual context window, if you will, of what you need is quite small. It's like the UK employment laws, your handbook, and just like some basic common sense, basically. And so we were like, oh, we can actually start to build an unstructured workflow automation platform. This is like before the language of, because this is 2021, right? And like we'd played with generative AI a bit, but candidly, like not that much. ChatGPT kind of only had its like big kind of almost like boom at the end, like a year after into us building it. But we were like, oh, okay, we can probably use some AI and like raise all this money and eventually do that. But we basically realized we could do that. And that's when I like left with Paul. And then we were like, we want Jack, who had already left Ori, because we like love Jack. He's super bright. He was a great builder, to come with us. And he was as crazy as we were. So he left his like very nice, high paying engineering job, manager job, to come and build with us. And yeah, that's kind of how we ended up building it. Basically, I got super obsessed with the problem and I got 2 people to come and leave with me because we were like, this shouldn't be here. We can alleviate human boredom.
So there's 2 things that I kind of mentioned.
Alleviate human boredom.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That was my raison d'etre. Like everyone, I was like, because like you've got to tell a sexy story to investors, which when you're building an unstructured workflow automation platform for HR is like a tall order. Because just saying that put people to sleep, right? Except Ken, who like actually kind of, we had a better story by then.
Yeah.
But.
I find it very interesting how few founders kind of try to refine their story. And like, as you just touched on the end there, speaking to these, taking the time out of your day to speak to like these 50 head of ops and HR people and like really understanding the problem, that market validation, which I feel like isn't really done. And we get to hear about like why you chose to take that approach. Like why did you find that, you became interesting? It'd be good to hear more about like, why did you start talking to, I guess, your ICP?
Yeah.
And,
Well, like I was my ICP and I was just like, someone must have solved this. Like, it's like, there's so much cool stuff technology can do. And I was also working in a deep tech, like distributed edge cloud computing platform. And I was like, we can do this, but like, I'm still doing this. This doesn't make sense to me. And like, I'm not technical. But I was like, it just like logically doesn't make sense to me. Like, why is this a problem? Right. And everybody, I guess I'm trying to tell this story in a way that's like not too boring. So I'm trying to keep it quite condensed. But basically, we all know that lots of platforms have integrations. And I guess the common way of thinking was, all these systems integrate together. But there was no like process workflow automation on top. They were like, oh, it's okay because all the data pushes into each other. And I was like, no. And I wrote out like a Miro of like all the times I was human in the loop because I left Ori and I knew all the systems. And I wrote out like 100 steps for payroll. And that's when like Paul finally got it. He was like, oh my God, that's crazy. I thought this was all automated. And I was like, no, it's not. But I think it's like now we understand this because we talk about AI agents and we basically just take that as parlance for like, all that like random shit that we used to do, like they can kind of do it now. Right. But that's like a step change. Like 3 years ago, we still didn't really think like that. I don't really know how to explain it well right now. It's been a while since I've described what Teamhouse does and it started. Yeah. But basically, we really struggled with the storytelling piece because what our big thing was basically like, hey, 70% of what a HR person does in 2 years, we think our platform will be able to do it all. And like before you could say like AI agents, like will take someone's job, you had to try and explain all the different steps that we were going to automate, which is like 300 different things, right? But actually it's the same core technology, but just applied slightly differently. And that was quite a hard thing to explain to people.
So succinctly, I guess for anyone watching and thinking about either taking their own startup or joining a startup, or maybe even investors in startups, what is the best way you find in terms of validating that market at such an early stage to say this is something we should be doing? Obviously, you did it yourself.
Yeah.
And then how did you refine your ability to storytell and refine the story?
So honestly, probably my inability to refine that quick enough is partly what killed my startup. So I guess going to the first thing, like I was like my ICP. So like I had the domain expertise. But I think this is an EF thing actually. Like I had been in it for like 3 years. So I was in it long enough that I knew the ins and outs of it. And actually I was like a chief of staff. So I wasn't like a HR person. It wasn't my bread and butter. So I wasn't tied to the status quo. I was okay to like rip it down. It wasn't like my job depended on that. Whereas like, you know, if I was going to automate myself out of a job, I might have been a little bit more. So I kind of didn't have that skin in the game. And I'd not been in it for so long that I couldn't see a different way of doing it. And I didn't understand why. And I think if you see something and you don't understand why it has to be like that, dig into that. Because then eventually I went down this huge rabbit hole of technology and got to this idea of unstructured workflows, which I'd never heard of. And then we found generative AI, and then we started playing with it and realizing we could put puzzle pieces together. But that process took like maybe 7 months.
Right.
It was like a lot of work after school.
Right.
Like we did lots and lots of work outside of work to figure that out.
Like its own job in itself, developing that, flexing that muscle to.
Yeah, because also what we did is like in a quick, I guess like to be a bit more how-to about it, it's not just speaking to people, like 50 people. I would say if you're trying to validate a problem, read something called the Mum Test, which is a book written by a product manager on like how to test ideas to make sure they got legs. And so he talks about the Mum Test, which is like, if you go and say to your mum, hey mum, if I put like cookbooks on Kindles, would you buy that? And they're like, yes, dear, of course. That's obviously like a terrible, terrible validation, right? Yeah. Of course, what you want to say is, hey, those cookbooks over there, like, how did you buy them? And like, oh, I never buy cookbooks. Those are presents. Oh, so you never put them on a Kindle? Like, oh, so you never read them on your Kindle? No. And then it's like, oh, okay, I can discard that idea, right? So you got to be able to ask good questions. Right. So that teaches you how to do that. And then the other thing is we did lots of Figma prototyping. So after our first batch of interviews, we kind of went in with a couple of hypotheses we wanted to prove. And we basically just did problem and product discovery, which is like, we didn't try and bias them. We just asked them how they worked. Right. And then if they had a problem, we didn't try and solve it for them. We just asked them if they'd tried to solve it before. Because if they're like, oh my God, it's a huge pain. And then you're like, oh, how have you tried to solve it? Oh, we haven't. It's not really a big pain, is it? Right. And actually you'd be surprised how often people say they have a big problem that they've literally never tried to fix or would ever pay any money for. And that's such a common trap you fall down.
And the amount of times I've been speaking to founders and asked them, have you spoken to any of your potential customers? And they say no. So I'm like, so why are you building at all?
Yeah.
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 Is that, out of interest, is that the same for B2B as well as B2C? Is that the same playbook? I'm just thinking B2B, it's maybe slightly easier if you're going for like a really wider audience. So B2C.
I think it depends. Like with B2B, you should probably understand the buyer dynamics of your like ICP, like a small business is very, very different to a large enterprise. And they've got completely different needs. They've got completely different buying cycles and completely different politics, candidly. And I think you also with B2B get into this idea of good buyer, bad buyer. So I didn't realize starting Teamhouse that HR is horrible. It's a horrible buyer. They never have budget. They don't always know what they want. And they're not always like their job and what gets them promoted is maybe not like what I was selling, which was like automation. Like actually they're more like culture, talent, performance. So we ended up having to sell to COOs who do care about efficiency metrics and automation. And they also see the full picture of like, because we would integrate into payroll and IT. And so we ended up having to shift to them. That's why lots of people try and sell to CFOs. CFOs are fantastic buyers, but everyone's trying to sell to them, right? So I learned that the hard way as well. Like I think having someone who's like from a good sales background and someone that's like from a good tech background is almost like the ideal, I think, for a B2B sales team, for an B2B founding team, which we weren't like, but we had domain expertise. So we had like good, I would say, early contacts, and therefore we got good traction early because we had just worked long enough to be able to ring people up.
It's interesting you say that like the actual buyer is not always the best buyer. So if you're selling into HR, it's not always best to target HR directly, because I sometimes think about that in sales. Whenever you speak to a sales guy, I think people's guards naturally go up a bit.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the best salespeople are like product people or whatever, who just, there doesn't seem to be that sticking block where people feel like they're being sold to.
Yeah.
And then they're like, you often get the best referrals from in-house from non-sales people.
Problem discovery, product discovery can be a very good backdoor into sales in the early stages. I think I would say by like Series A, you need to be like building up quite a repeatable, scalable like sales playbook. But in the early stages, you should also like in your early stages not be trying to sell. You should be trying to solve problems, right? And you should be solutionizing, because your product will pivot and pivot and pivot for a while, I think, until you actually figure out what people want.
Yeah, and I think it's also a big part of the salesperson as well. Like, I think being a good salesperson is really just about curiosity. And that's like, you know, if you're curious about like the customer and how they operate and how they do things, they should, hopefully there won't be any guard up. But it's also just like working through that conversational aspect of it. And like, now, so have you thought about this? Have you tried using this? It's like, oh, no, just how does this work for you guys? How do you like it? You know, that's like also about the you know?
Yeah. I think everyone builds up their own biases of what they look for in founders. And I think you've got the same one as me, which is like, I really like to see that founders like deeply know and care about their customers more than anything.
Yeah.
Because if you understand them inside out and you talk to them regularly and you try and sell to them and you try and work with them, it gives you some confidence that there's something there. Whereas like, if they've never talked to the person they're trying to sell to, it's a bit of a bad sign. I think it's quite a bad sign, to be honest.
And you mentioned how long it took to refine that storytelling for the startup kind of killed the startup. So maybe we could kind of get into, I guess, the fundraising journey, how that was in terms of like, you know, that whole thing was for you. And I'll preface your response to saying like, as Back Feature Venture, we did commit to this round. So we very much supporters in Hanna. And like, that's why, you know, we're still rocking with it today. We're at Blue Wire. So, but
Yeah, so we sort of went to fundraise in May and actually realized we did. 23, I want to say. That's all blurring, isn't it? But we realized we didn't have enough. And so we kind of put our heads back down and went back out in November. And we basically...
Sorry, when you say didn't have enough, do you mean like product market fit and like
like we didn't have enough to fundraise, like enough of anything really. Like we had a lot of customer conversations. We had some early proof of concepts of what like the tech could do in terms of like we'd built this sort of Slack native bot that could integrate into your handbook, and it would be able to answer questions, which sounds really boring. But there are certain companies, like we talked to one company that had 5,000 employees, where they'd get 1,500 questions a month that they had to manually respond to.
Yeah.
And they would also categorize all those questions by type so that they could figure out where they needed to write new policies and stuff like that. So it was like very time consuming for certain kinds of companies. So we built that, but we hadn't built this like full, almost like agentic experience where it could then automate actions like updating HR systems and stuff off the back of it, and like really starting to take away like more complex work. But yeah, we couldn't really sell it as well because it was like very POC. It was very like, look what we've built and look at the wait list we've got. And like that used to be enough to raise back when it was hypey, like 21 in good old COVID years, like
free money.
And like the market shifted quite dramatically. I think, you know, we made mistakes, but we were also maybe a victim of market timing, which was that I think people forget when generative AI first came out, everyone was quite scared about what it was going to mean, and no one had formed their theses yet on what they thought about how AI was going to affect technology, society, and therefore they couldn't make good investment decisions, right? Until you're like, this is what I think the world's going to look like, you can't then invest, right?
Yeah.
So when we first started, everyone was like, AI is not going to be that good. Like I remember having a conversation with an investor where he was like, I'm not even sure it's going to be good enough to imitate tone of voice of your company culture. And we were like, it will be. Trust us. We're not AI experts or PhDs, but trust me, it will be. And like we've now all obviously seen that it can imitate a tone of voice, right? But this is like November 23, I had this conversation.
Right.
And this was with like an engineering VC, like, you know, they were engineers as their background. So, and everybody thought incumbents were going to do it. Salesforce is going to win. Workday is going to win. I don't see how a startup's going to get in here. They've got all the distribution, blah, blah, blah. And then it very quickly went to the foundation models are the only place that has any value. Everything that's an application layer is just GPT wrapper. I don't see like how you can build any value in the long term here, which is now like completely different. Everybody's into verticalized AI application layer SaaS, but not even a year ago. So we were a verticalized AI like application layer SaaS. And we didn't have any like AI native talent in the team, but you don't need it. I think everyone now is like, oh, domain expertise plus a good engineer, fine. Right. But a year and a half ago, it was like, where's your AI PhD? Where's your technical? And like, what about you guys? Like, we didn't have like a commercial person, you know, like we didn't have someone from a sales background either. So I can kind of see now I'm evaluating startups where our gaps were. Yeah. But at the time, I didn't really see it. I kind of wish I'd done this job for 3 months before I ever went and founded, because I would do it so differently. And then with the storytelling piece, because I haven't got to that, market timing's an issue because there's like there's a narrative going on in the wider stream that you ideally want to jump onto. Right. But if you can't, because the narrative is kind of against what you're doing and you're being contrarian in its truest form, you've got to either have enough traction that it speaks for itself and you're like, look, it's true. Or you've got to have like maybe some kind of like really deep, like tick technical team. Or you've got to at least be able to sell the vision. And I think the challenge we had is that, like when I first said AI agents to somebody, like I tried that language out. People were like, what do you mean? What's an AI agent? I don't really understand what that looks like.
You needed Jensen Huang to say it.
Yeah, it was just like, it was really, really hard. It's really hard to explain something, especially like something as unsexy as HR or back office automation, when like I've now seen like the coolest stuff. So I'm like, God, I can't even imagine what someone's next call was after me. It was probably like, we're going to go put like servers on the moon. And I was like, I'm going to upload P45s. Like, and someone's like, oh, go away. You know what I mean? Like snooze. But it's really, really hard to explain something to a generalist who doesn't know your domain in a way that's engaging without common language. Like now we have common language like AI agents and we all kind of have this concept of what it does and why it matters. But it's really hard to educate somebody and then also tell them a story. Yeah. And I can't say I ever managed to do that. And I would say it's much easier for me now to be like, oh, like I was building something called Teamhouse. We were building AI agents for enterprise HR teams. Everybody now goes, oh my God, that's so cool. They completely understand what I was doing. Yeah. A year and a half ago, I had no such luck. It would take me like 5 minutes to try and explain what we were doing. And so the conversations actually where we did best were with people who didn't really want to know what we were doing as much as why we were doing it and what we had seen and what would be different if we were right. And like, actually that was the conversation we had. Yeah. You're a bit like, okay, automation for HR. I don't know that much about HR, but like, how did you guys find this problem? Oh, me and Paul have both done this job for like, between us, 15 years. And we tried this and we did this. And this is the list of things we're going to automate. And if we do it, then we're going to, like, the result is going to be this. And that was the conversation we had. And like, those conversations for us went a lot better. But different investors have different styles.
Yeah. And I guess in that fundraising part, there's, we get to know what was it like, I guess, going through due diligence, because due diligence with the lead investor and closing and like landing that lead investor. I think that's going to be like a whole thing for a lot of founders. They say they don't know how to diligence their investors, say like, oh, like they don't know who leads and who doesn't. How do you get in touch with them? I do know how you guys got in touch with the lead investor, but what was that process like? I think a lot of founders are, especially first time, in the blind about what that looks and feels like.
Yeah, so our lead investor was the very first investor we spoke to.
Okay,
funnily
fair
enough. And they spoke to us like when we first started the company, and they would check in with us like every 3 or 4 months. and see how we'd progressed. So they'd been tracking us for quite a long time. And actually one of them had done a COO role. And we had personally just much better conversations with operators or people who'd had the job. Right. Because we didn't have to do any education. They just knew the problems and we didn't have to try and explain what the problems were. So we could just jump straight to what our solution was. And so we had these like very big, almost like sparring matches where they would test our thinking and then we'd push back and then they'd check in 4 months.
So you kind of skipped the pitch, I guess, a little bit.
A little bit. Like we still had to do a pitch at the end, which is like, this is where we've got to. This is what we're going out with. And this is like our progress. Are you in or out? Because we're raising now. And like that was, and I think that maybe a big mistake that a lot of people make when you're going out as a founder is there's this thing that you have to have a lot of momentum, right? Like when you start a raise, there's a lot of FOMO. So get it done really quickly. Everybody comes in because otherwise, like if you're just like hanging around like a bad smell, everybody kind of like gets cold feet and loses. Blah, blah, blah. You have to like play this like psychology of it.
Time kills all deals.
Exactly. But the challenge is what you want to be doing is building relationships before. Like if you are a founder that executes really well, like the biggest sign of a good founder or a good founding team are people that get shit done, for want of a better way. And so if you can build a rapport where you kind of check in with an investor, you're not fundraising yet, but you can be like, hey, and like actually we've built all of this and like, wow, they've done that in 3 months. Oh yeah, and we've got pilot, like, and you just slowly build this relationship and actually you really trust them. Those can be very powerful when you then go into fundraising because you've got all of this, they've got all of the backstory on you and that can really help. It can be really hard to just come in really hot from a cold start. And it can work, especially if you're like, you know, you were the ex-head of product at Revolut or something. Do you know what I mean? Like if your profile's really strong, but if you're a first-time founder, building up some good relationships with a few funds, checking in with them, building like an execution story and a narrative and not having to do the cold hard pitch from day zero. If you can do that and you can keep leaving the door open is really, really powerful. And it's something that's a hard balance.
And with when they were doing that kind of coming back, pitching back, were you guys were running investor updates in tandem with this or before that?
Yeah,
like in terms of,
every time we would talk to somebody, we would, and I don't know if this is actually even the right way to do it, but we, like Paul, my co-founder, was an ex-journalist, to be fair, and he's a great writer. So every month we would write an investor update because we had angels that we also had to update, right? So we would just add a couple of investors onto those updates so that they could just track us. And Paul did great updates. Now, I don't know if that reduced the mystery and the FOMO or if people liked that. I guess it actually probably depends on what kind of person you are. I think some people it might have helped with. Yeah. And with them, I think it clearly did. But yeah.
That's kind of talking about like investing in people that execute. Even before if we have a first call, like, but you've been doing investor updates for like 4 months. You could just say, oh, by the way, this is what we've done so far. You can check it out, see how we've done it. I guess see how you're thinking about things and how you're getting them done.
Yeah.
And like that makes the follow-up so much more efficient, I feel.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that is true, especially if you are, and I think it's a good discipline to get into, is to update your angels monthly, because you're going to have to start doing it at some point. But it's also a really good, like we used to go back and read our own updates to be like, how much have we moved in 3 months? Oh, wow, 3 months ago we were here. Yep. And it's also really good for your own storytelling to be like, do you know what? We had this idea, we pivoted for X reason.
And I feel like building in public more generally, I know the investor updates normally have a bit more confidential information, but it's been like a bit of a move to build out in public.
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't think there's like a right or a wrong here. I think it's just about understanding if you do X, then Y happens or Z happens, right? Like sometimes building in public can be great because you get your brand out there, investors can know you, it keeps yourself accountable. But maybe other times, if you're in a really competitive space, maybe you don't want people to know what you're doing. Like, I don't think there's like a totally right way to do it.
Yeah, so I suppose would it be a red flag if someone was like building in public and they pivoted again? Would you begin to be like?
No, I think it's fine. Again, it comes back to how you're telling the story. You know, there was one guy. He came out the gate on LinkedIn, huge splash. I don't know how he did it, and then he was speaking to the top VCs in Europe at the time. And then they said time kills all deals. It was always just like this, that, and the third. Something was new here. Then he was asking for NDAs, and like, and we spoke about this before. I'm like, if you're an early stage founder and you're trying to get people to sign an NDA, especially from an institutional VC, that's a good way to just have that conversation ended right then and there.
You do hear about like people's ideas being stolen by, I think it's super rare. I think it's super duper rare, but you do hear about these horror stories, but ultimately an NDA wouldn't have changed that horror story.
Yeah.
And why, because you explained this to me privately, but it's worth potentially covering for like viewers. You know, from the outsider, right, you would think an NDA makes sense. Like I'm just protecting my idea, I'm protecting my business. It's signed on dockside in less than 30 seconds. Why is that seen as an investor in an early stage startup as like a warning sign that they want you to sign an NDA?
I wouldn't say it's a warning sign. It's just...
What if I see better people doing your idea? Which is like a joke, but like...
I guess it's just, it comes across a bit...
amateur.
Yeah, because like...
Kent's not sitting on the fence.
I think
Hannah's
it's...
trying to be really tactical, and Kent's like...
Yeah, I think it's just like, I guess I'm trying to say it in the right way, which is just like, if you stop and think for more than 5 seconds, it's completely non-enforceable, and therefore it's a redundant step.
So people thinking for 3 seconds and no more.
Yeah, so it just kind of feels like someone's not thought this through, which is not a great sign, right? Like you want someone to be quite business savvy if you're about to give them money.
Yeah.
And it comes across as not very business savvy, because unless they're like, we are this super deep tech company and we're going into later stage DD and we're going to share like very proprietary stuff about our technology with you, can you sign this NDA? That makes sense. But if it's like, I'm going to send you my pitch deck, can you sign an NDA? Then it just comes across like, I'm not sure I trust this person to run a business, because like anyone who's been in business more than 5 seconds knows that NDAs are mostly redundant because you can't really ever enforce them, particularly on like very non-proprietary stuff, right?
Yeah. I suppose if someone's going to give you like the model weights to their LLM, it would be very different to that you say just like literally just a pitch deck.
Yeah. Yeah, like there are people that are building like incredibly deep tech that might need to share something incredibly like private and protected. That I get, but that's not like after a first call.
And speaking of, not speaking of anything, but I guess we kind of covered this idea of, well, not this idea of your time running a startup and raising for that closing, that almost doing the round, which then unfortunately fell apart. But like,
yeah, sorry, we kind of got a bit off track there, didn't I? Like I was saying, I've got so much better at storytelling since I've been a founder, but maybe I haven't. I've been just going off on tangents.
Well, I really enjoyed the like 10 minutes of humbleness. Like I should have been better at storytelling, and I was. Yeah, so our first investor was our lead investor. Couldn't have been that bad.
No. So I will say I spoke to 100 VCs in my pre-seed raise, and I couldn't raise in Europe. I couldn't get a lead here. So I went to the States, and this VC happened to be in the States. And yes, they'd been tracking us for the longest time, but they were also the only one that was prepared to put a term sheet down. I spoke to everyone. And actually, like, that was the lesson of like, oh, maybe if I'd had a few more of these people that we'd kept warm, like had sparring, like intellectual sparring matches with, like kept the door open, rather than just having one to practice with and then going out and trying to do, like, the advice I got was like, go out, do it fast, get lots of momentum. Like we had inbound from a very big neobank, and we thought we could potentially turn that, like, we were like, that's a lot of signal. They reached out to us. They found us. Their supplier team, their procurement team was like, this will solve all your problems. We had like that from a neobank and then one other like very big public company. And we were like, okay, like this is enough signal to go out and raise a round. And yeah, it just didn't happen here. And then, I went out to the States. These people put a term sheet down. We did about 2/3 of the round. We actually closed the round after 2 months. And then the second largest ticket pulled out. So we had to go back out to raise. And time kills all deals. Because by that point, it looks like I've been raising for 3 months, and I sort of haven't. But by then, there was no momentum.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew I was like flogging a dead horse, but like you have to go back out.
What a soldier.
Yeah.
How
but
tough
it's like
was that?
it was tough. And I wish I hadn't lost so much faith. Like, because also I am now watching my ideas be vindicated. There is a startup doing what I was doing. They kind of pivoted into what I was doing, and they're doing decently well. Like they just
do we name drop? Do we give flowers?
No, because I like them. I like the team. And like, you know, they took it up after we put it down.
I mean, like,
right?
giving them flowers. They're working out.
They're working it out, but, you know, they just signed, you know, like a public company and a unicorn. And so I'm kind of like, I was right. I wish I hadn't lost so much like faith from the process. Like, it is quite a demoralizing process, speaking to 100 people and having like 2 people say yes, and then 1 pulling out, and everyone being like, yeah, I don't get it, I don't see it. And then like a year later, all the same people who didn't see it being like,
writing Substacks, being like, it's so obvious.
Yeah, it's like, I think venture is a funny world though, because now I've been on this side of the table, I do understand why.
Yeah.
Like, from the pitches where I told a bad story to like, if I looked at our team, we had a good team, but we weren't like the obvious archetype. Like, and also I now do this. So for anybody who is fundraising, I don't know if how you think about your mental model of how you evaluate startups. I don't look for tick boxes.
Yeah.
But what I do is I've got half an hour and I speak to 20 people a week. And basically at the end of the week, whoever has spiked the most, they're like the 2 conversations I will take, right? Across founders and the idea and the market.
When you say spiked, what do you mean?
I guess like I'm talking to someone and I'm trying to ask them questions so I can understand like, what's their background? What makes them tick? Are they resilient? And every time they say something where I'm like, oh, that's a point in their favor. Oh, wow, they've done something really incredible before. Oh, wow, they're really resilient. Oh, wow, they knew loads about their market. Oh, they really seem to understand their customer. Oh, that's an interesting, their business model's got a really good flywheel for growth. Ah, that's actually very sticky. Like I always just like make almost like a score mark, right?
Right.
And what I'm trying to do is like give you as many marks as possible.
Right.
And at the end of the week, I'm going to take basically the 2 out of 20 that have like spiked the most, have got like the most interesting potential. And so if you are a founder going for like funding, I think the most common mistakes I see is people talk for too long on the same question, because it's like, dude, we've got 30 minutes. If you can say this in 30 seconds, it just gives you more time to tell me all the other ways like that you're so great.
And your eyes start glazing over after a while.
I think it's more just like, I think people really want to prove the point, but it's more like, I want to ask you 3 questions so you can tell me the 3 reasons that you're a great founder, but don't tell me the 1 reason you're a great founder for 3 minutes. You know, if you can do it the other way, like we're trying to get through a volume here.
Right.
A lot of prelude.
Yeah.
So I think
you said that a lot.
I think, and you can't help it. You have like kind of verbal diarrhea a bit, I think, as well. But I think everyone having note takers, I hope, has really benefited everyone. I hope people go back through their note takers. But yeah, be as quick as possible. Don't wait to be asked if you want something to say something. Like, it's really interesting now I'm on this side of the table. VCs share articles and thinkings around like what makes good founders. So like there's one article about Hummingbird VC. They're like the best VC no one's ever heard of. They have like a 9x DPI, which is insane. Like, you know, top 5% early stage funds have like 3x DPIs. So this is like just mental. And they wrote a whole article on like what kind of founder they look for. And the TLDR is that they look for neurodivergent people with trauma, and clock speed. Is that the last one? Basically, they look for people that are like autistic or have ADHD, people with like big trauma in their past, and are like big, like just like high clock speed, like high executors.
Right. That sounds a bit like playing devil's advocate. That just doesn't necessarily like sound what you would look for. If someone came into a meeting and be like, why should I invest in you? Be like, I've got autism, ADHD, my mum died when I was 3. You'd be like, Jesus, like everything okay?
No, I wouldn't say you would say that, but I think it's good to know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And like if someone's not asking you, like if you're a great founder because you've got domain expertise and someone's not bringing that up, tell them. Or like if you've done something that makes you an exceptional person and they're not asking you about your past, be like, yeah, look, do you know what? I will say like, this isn't my first idea. I actually did this and I've always had this drive because like, can I just tell you a bit about my background? And get like, I think I waited to be asked about things. And then we get off the call and I was like, why didn't I lead that conversation more? Like I would wait to be asked about how we got to the idea, you know, when actually we had a really great story of all the ways that we iterated and got into big companies. And like, I saved those stories until it sort of came up. I should have gone in with an agenda being like, I need this person to know that like, I've moved to 3 continents and worked abroad. Like my dad was an entrepreneur. Like my first job out of university was a chief of staff at a Series B. Like I need to like Paul got around the world on his own only using Twitter. He Twitch hiked all the way to New Zealand.
Unreal.
Like without spending any money, just relying on the kindness of strangers. Like that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
And like that would have set us apart when you're, you know, found an investor speaking to 20 people like a week, right? And we kind of never brought those things up. People would find out after they'd said they'd invest.
To be fair, like this sounds such an awful term, but like meeting craft was something that I'd never given any thought to before I joined Barclays.
Yeah.
And then went from being like support to running my own client book. And it was one thing I learned from like a senior guy in the private bank team there who just was like exceptionally good at just like steering meetings.
Yeah.
And that's like what you're describing. It's only when you see someone who's really good at it makes sense.
It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But it's a really valuable skill. Because I think you're a bit like, oh, you're interviewing me. And it's like the best meetings are conversations. Like you should be asking them as many questions as you. And you should get off the call knowing what they look for, what their investment style is, what they like. And then you follow up and you tailor it. It's a sales process at the end of the day.
Yeah. And with that, you know, I mentioned obviously you're doing now being on the side of the table, how it's been for you, learning all the learnings. What's it been? What was your route into VC?
So yeah, like I said, I guess like the quick one is basically my round took too long. My investors pulled their term sheet, which is very unusual, but it does happen. I didn't really know if I wanted to try and find a way to keep doing it, but I was so deep that I couldn't see the wood from the trees. So I actually decided, maybe somewhat strangely, to go do a coding boot camp for 3 months last summer.
Fair enough.
I always wanted to learn to code. I knew I didn't want to be a software engineer, or at least I thought that like I wouldn't be able to train up to be a senior software anyway. But I was super curious. I'm super curious. I've always wanted to learn. And I just thought I might as well do it now. I don't know when I'll get another opportunity, because I thought about going traveling because I haven't done that for a long time. It's been like 8 years since I've really done any proper traveling. But I did kind of think I would just be like walking around the Amazon thinking about my company, and that I wouldn't enjoy it because I just have too much thinking time. So actually doing this like 9 to 6, 7, like back to school, like you're not allowed to think about it. There's zero time. I just moved back to my parents and I like kept bees with my dad and went on like very long runs in the morning. It was like just very wholesome and
Kept
good.
bees.
Yeah, my dad has 7 beehives.
Fair
So
enough. You're the second guest in a row to have to be like a beekeeper. Or,
yeah. Like
It's
so
a trend.
there's gonna be raw honey for everyone at the end of this. So as a thank you.
Link in the description for Hannah's honey.
Are you
Hannah's
already
illegal honey.
selling a gift?
We can get it like co-branded,
Yeah.
you know, Malvern House Apiaries, I think that's what my dad calls it, X, the mergers. So, you know, coming totally illegal to sell, but
Okay. Well, we'll take donations.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's,
Donations and, you know, at their own risk.
yep.
They can sign a waiver
Not
or an
even
NDA.
Not even a
maybe.
label on it.
Yeah, so I did that. And then while I was doing that, a company reached out to me being like, hey, we're hiring for our go-to-market team, blah, blah, blah. I talked to the founder, got super excited about it, but to be honest, hadn't really processed what it meant to put my company down. And I jumped straight into that. And then when I was doing that, I realized that my dream career had been successful exited founder and then investor. Like I'd always wanted to take that route.
Except now you went like this.
Yeah.
Instead of this is
Yeah, in my head I was going to do that, and then I was going to be like a successful exited female founder, and I could like go back and contribute to the ecosystem, you know, as an operator, etc. And I guess when I was working at Omnia, I was loving it. It's an amazing team. But I was also like, this like very key assumption I made that I had to be a successful exited founder to go into VC is actually not true, is it? Right. I can actually just go do that. So I got a scouting position doing that. And I was like, you know what? I will build again. I won't be the founder, but I'll build and I'll be part of a really successful team. And then I'll go into venture. So that could be my next outing. But while I was doing scouting, someone was like, hey, are you actually just looking for a VC job? Because I know someone hiring. I think you'd be great for it. I think you'd be a really good fit. And then I met the team and I just really like, maybe people don't know this who aren't in VC, but all VCs have like very different personalities, approaches, styles, how they invest, like how they structure their fund and who can run what. And so you kind of once you decide what you like and then you narrow it down, it actually goes from like a very small pool to a very, very small pool. And there were these certain things I wanted. I wanted to be entrepreneurial. I wanted to run my own deals. I wanted to be in a generalist fund. I wanted, the fund to have like a great track record and like a great name. And it just kind of all lined up that it was Blue Wire because, like you just mentioned some of the names in their portfolio before, but, more recently they've done things like Beehive and Faircraft and other deals that like Practica. Just they're a really, they've got a really wide range of different investments, but they're very first principled in how they approach it. They're very entrepreneurial. They're very agile. I really respected them as a fund. And so it really worked out that I got to know the team and I just really wanted to join. So it I ended up leaving startups a bit earlier than I expected, is basically.
But it's fun. It's kind of funny. There's always people that say, how did they break into startups? But a lot of times people got into it because they started doing the job first. Like you said, you just wanted to be a scout. You were doing your other stuff, but you had kind of, by way of being a founder, you made your kind of name in the ecosystem as well.
Yeah.
But so you kind of did the job before. And then they say, hey, I know someone that's hiring for VC. And then like even the way the deals we invest in, a lot of times VCs will hire the people that come from people that we trust versus the cold inbounds.
Yes, exactly. It's precisely that. So my route into venture was a little bit not accidental, but it was not something I was planning on doing until like Omnia had kind of scaled to Series D or something, and then I thought I was going to leave. But this just came about earlier, and I just thought, why not? Taking it like. I quite like new adventures. And so, yeah.
How do you find it being on the other side of the table?
I mean, I think if you are incredibly intellectually curious and you love meeting incredibly smart people and you love sort of entrepreneurship and the idea of making new things and changing things, there's no better job. Like in startups, you're very, very deep. And then with this job, there's a lot of breadth. So the context switching is a lot. But at the same time, the fact that I can talk to sort of a climate tech company and then a health tech company and then even like a marketing tech company, and you're meeting all these different kinds of people, it is really incredible. Like I love it. It feels like a real, I know everyone says this is a bit of lip service, but it is like a real privilege.
To be capital allocator, that's no small thing.
Yeah, I think as well though, it's really easy to see how you could waste a lot of time in this job doing the wrong things. A weird thing about this job that's very different, ironically, from the startups they invest in is, and we've talked about this, the feedback loops are really, really long. Yeah. So in a startup, like stuff works very quickly or it doesn't, and you change. Whereas like, it can be like 10 years before you realize an investment's any good or not, or if you're any good at the job, which is kind of mad. So in terms of how you choose to spend your time to get results, it's quite fuzzy. So I could see how you could spend a lot of time doing the wrong things in this job if you're not kind of quite diligent. Yeah. But it's quite cool. Like it's quite autonomous. You have a lot of leeway. Like you can, it's very interesting in that respect. Like, and it's very about people. I think particularly at the early stages, growth stage is very different.
Yep. Just trying to drill down into that a bit more. Without that feedback cycle, like what points do you anchor on?
So I've been anchoring a lot on asking, like looking for mentorship, like both within my fund and out of it. I think that is one thing. Like, I talked to someone at Sequoia and I asked them about how they learn. And I think something Sequoia do a lot is that they bring in they bring in partners to tell stories of investments to the new partners and like the new principals and just try and pass on that tribal knowledge. So I have taken like a lot of meetings with people who have been in the industry a while and just kind of like asking for them to pay it forward a bit. And actually everyone I've reached out to has said yes. And I've definitely taken a lot of advice on that way. And so then what I do is I take the advice they give me and I try and implement it and see if it kind of is generating some results. There's also some like quick feedback things and some longer feedback things. So one is like just doing cold outbound, like I'm in sales again, which is just reaching out to founders on LinkedIn and you're booking a certain amount of meetings a week fairly quickly off that. And then there are like the more long-term things, which is like getting involved in communities and trying to pay it back with office hours or getting to know other VCs because it's still quite a networked industry. I think I underestimated how much network is involved in early stage VC. Having sat on the other side of the table, like everybody talks.
For better or worse.
For better or worse. No comment on whether it's a good or a bad thing. It just is a thing that happens.
Yeah.
That's just the truth.
You just got to protect your reputation.
I would say they don't talk about each other. They just talk about deals. It's not like...
No, I meant like as a founder.
Oh, yes.
Because,
and you can't, so you can't bullshit a VC. So I shouldn't swear so much, but like you can't lie to a VC A, because VC A and B will talk and you'll very be quickly found out.
Oh man, there's times like a VC, like they'll tell me something about they're in process of VC. I'll literally text them while we're on the call.
Yeah, exactly.
I have 2 screens and I'll be like, and I'll have the answer before they even finish the call.
Exactly. So like, I would not try and pull the wool over a VC's eyes. It will just come out on the wash very quickly.
Quite good advice for anyone currently on a call. I think that was really interesting and a really good place to leave it. Thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to leave your LinkedIn for people to get in touch?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. Thank you very much. We'll put the LinkedIn in the show notes. Thanks again. Also, Ken, do you want to do a quick shout out? Thank you for that.
Yeah, big thanks to Dominic over at Design Ticket for giving us our very own logo block, if that's even what it's called, but it looks pretty nifty. It upscales the experience.
Well, thanks again for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Like I said, we got over 1,000 followers now. So thank you for supporting on the journey.
Big ups.